Rich student tore the black teacher's shirt. Minutes later, his father and the governor walked in. The sound was sharp, a dry, tearing sound that ripped through the silence of the 300-year-old classroom. It was the sound of cotton and thread giving way, a sound that had no business being in a place like St. Alastair's Prep Academy. The sound was followed by a collective, horrified gasp from 35 students. Ms. Anya Sharma, the new history teacher, looked down. The front of her crisp, white button-down shirt was hanging open, a long, jagged tear running from her collarbone to her ribs, exposing the dark undershirt beneath. Kyle Thompson, the star of the lacrosse team and the son of the school's biggest donor, stood a foot away, his hand still balled into a fist, threads of white cotton still clinging to his knuckles. Kyle's face was a mask of pure, arrogant rage. He had done it. He had actually put his hands on a teacher. He had torn Ms. Sharma's shirt, in front of everyone, during roll call. The air crackled, thick with the unspoken. Ms. Sharma, the only black woman educator at the academy, stood perfectly still, her dignity the only thing in the room holding itself together. She didn't cover herself. She didn't shout. She simply held the bully's gaze. And in that moment, the entire power dynamic of the school, an institution built on centuries of unchallenged privilege, began to teeter on the edge of a knife. This story is intense, and the truth about prejudice often is. Before we dive into what happened in that classroom and the moments that followed, I want to know where you're watching from. The issues we talk about on this channel are global. Comment below with your city or country. It's a small way to show that we are all connected in this conversation. Okay, now let's go back. It had all started 3 weeks earlier, on a crisp September morning. Ms. Anya Sharma had walked through the towering iron gates of St. Alastair's for the first time as a faculty member, not a visitor. The academy was a fortress of old money, a place where the sons and daughters of senators and CEOs were polished like antique silver. Ms. Sharma, with her PhD in African American Studies and a decade of teaching in the nation's toughest, most underfunded public schools, felt like a woman walking on the moon. She was brilliant, she was qualified, and she knew, with a sinking certainty, that none of that mattered to them. To the board, she was a statistic, a historic hire they could put in their diversity brochures. To the staff, she was a curiosity, a temporary experiment. And to the students? She found out soon enough. Her first class was American Civics. The room was oppressive with history, the walls lined with oil paintings of stern, white men who had graduated and gone on to run the world. The students filed in, their $1,000 backpacks slung over their blazers, their faces set in a uniform expression of bored entitlement. She stood at the front, a warm, genuine smile on her face, and said, "Good morning, everyone. I am Ms. Sharma." That's when she first saw Kyle Thompson. Kyle, slouched in the back row, didn't look up from his phone. He just laughed. A short, sharp, dismissive ha. It was a seed of disrespect, planted deliberately. "Mr. Thompson, I believe," Ms. Sharma said, her voice calm. Kyle slowly, theatrically, lifted his head. "Yeah. Welcome to class. Phone away, please." Kyle sighed, as if Ms. Sharma had asked him to donate a kidney. He slid the phone into his pocket, then immediately turned to his friend and whispered, "Heard my dad. Said they had to hire one. An equity teacher." The whisper was designed to be heard. A verbal stone thrown to test his new target. Ms. Sharma felt the familiar sting, the hot flush of anger, and did what she always did. She compressed it. She turned it into fuel. She let it go. "Today," Ms. Sharma said, turning to the board, "we're going to discuss the Plessy versus Ferguson case. I want to talk about the concept of—" Kyle's hand shot up, but he didn't wait to be called on. "Is this going to be, one of those classes?" Ms. Sharma paused. "One of those classes, Mr. Thompson?" "Yeah," Kyle said, leaning back, putting his feet on the desk in front of him. "Where we have to, feel guilty all the time. My dad says this whole critical race thing is, what did he call it? Reverse racism." The other students, the ones who followed Kyle like pilot fish, snickered. Ms. Sharma looked at the boy. He wasn't just a bully. He was a symptom of a disease of unearned confidence and inherited prejudice. "This is a history class, Mr. Thompson," Ms. Sharma said, her voice like steel. "The facts of history are not reverse racism. They are simply facts. And in this room, we will be discussing them. Your feet. Off the desk." Now, there was a new, dangerous edge to her voice. Kyle, surprised at the direct challenge, slowly, insolently, lowered his feet. He had lost the first skirmish. And Anya Sharma knew, with chilling certainty, that Kyle would make it his mission to win the war. The next 2 weeks were a campaign of psychological warfare. Ms. Sharma was not a stupid woman. She knew exactly what Kyle was doing. It wasn't overt, not at first. It was the small, insidious things, the microaggressions designed to bleed her authority dry, one paper cut at a time. When Ms. Sharma discussed the Harlem Renaissance, Kyle would ask why they weren't studying European art. When Ms. Sharma assigned a reading from W.B. Du Bois, Kyle would forget his book. He and his small group of followers would disrupt the class with inane questions, with quiet jokes, with a constant, simmering undercurrent of disrespect. They called her Ms. S. Sharmalama, and, in the hallways where they thought she couldn't hear, the affirmative action, Ms. Sharma, in response, did the one thing they couldn't stand. She remained. She was calm. She was professional. She was, by every metric, a better teacher than any of them had ever had. She was engaging, she was brilliant, and she refused to be rattled. This, more than anything, enraged Kyle. Kyle was a boy who was used to getting a reaction. He could make his tutors cry. He had gotten the last Latin teacher reassigned, after complaining to his father that the man was too strict. He was a king in his own small, gilded kingdom, and this new teacher, this black woman who dared to be smarter and stronger-willed than him, was an insult to his entire existence. Miss Sharma, for her part, tried to get help. She went to the headmistress, a severe woman named Mrs. Davies. She sat in her palatial office, the same office where a portrait of Kyle Thompson's great-grandfather hung on the wall. Mrs. Davies, Miss Sharma said, I am having an issue with Kyle Thompson. His behavior is disruptive and, frankly, bordering on racist harassment. Mrs. Davies steepled her fingers, her face a mask of polite concern. Anya, she said, using her first name in a way that felt like a pat on the head. Kyle is spirited. His family is the bedrock of St. Alistair's. Perhaps you're not accustomed to the, shall we say, confidence of our young men. She was telling her, in the coded language of the elite, that the problem was not the bully, but the victim. Are you, she continued, perhaps, misinterpreting his enthusiasm? Sometimes a teacher who is new to this environment can see shadows where there are none. She was being gaslit. She was being told that the racism she had felt her entire life, the racism she could spot a mile away, was just a figment of her imagination. I am not misinterpreting anything, Ms. Sharma said, standing up. I am telling you that this is a problem, and if you won't deal with it, I will. She left her office, the message clear. She was alone. The institution would not protect her. It would only protect the money. The tension in her classroom grew thicker. The other students, the ones who weren't in Kyle's inner circle, watched with a kind of terrified fascination. They saw the daily confrontations. They saw Ms. Sharma's heroic, impossible patience. And they saw Kyle's frustration building. He was failing to break the teacher, and it was driving him insane. He needed to escalate. He needed a public execution. The day before the incident, Kyle waited for Ms. Sharma after class. Ms. Sharma was erasing the board when Kyle's voice cut through the empty room. You know, my dad's on the board. He's not happy. He doesn't like what you're teaching. He doesn't like you. Ms. Sharma turned slowly. Is that a threat, Kyle? It's a fact, Kyle sneered, his eyes cold and empty. People like you. You don't last long here. You're a guest, and I think it's time for you to leave. Ms. Sharma picked up her leather satchel. I'm not going anywhere, Kyle. You will learn the curriculum. You will pass the final. Or you will fail. Your father's money can't take the test for you. She walked past the boy, her shoulder almost brushing Kyle's. Kyle, incensed at being dismissed, shoved his fist into a nearby locker, the bang echoing in the empty hall. You'll regret that. You'll see. Miss Sharma didn't look back. She knew the confrontation was coming. She knew it would be public. She just didn't know how far the boy would take it. The next morning, the air was electric. It was the third Friday of the month, which meant formal Friday. Students were in their full-dress blazers. Miss Sharma was wearing her best suit jacket, a crisp white shirt, and a simple black tie. She stood at her desk, ready to begin. The final bell rang. Good morning, she said, opening her attendance book. We'll start with roll call. She began the names. Adams. Here. Bishop. Here. Cromwell. Here. Thompson, Kyle. Silence. Kyle was in his usual seat in the back, his feet on the desk, his blazer off, and his phone held up, openly filming Miss Sharma. Mr. Thompson, Miss Sharma said, her voice quiet, patient. Phone away. Feet down. This is your final warning. Kyle laughed. His friends, the three other boys who formed his crew, laughed with him. Or what? Kyle said, his voice dripping with condescension. What are you going to do about it? You going to call the headmistress? Oh, wait. She works for my dad. Miss Sharma closed the attendance book. She set it down. She walked, slowly, deliberately, down the aisle between the desks, stopping directly in front of Kyle. The other students held their breath. Kyle, Miss Sharma said, her voice so low only the front rows could hear. I will not let you disrupt the education of these other students. Put the phone away. She was standing over Kyle now. Kyle, for the first time, seemed to realize he had pushed too far. The woman in front of him wasn't just a teacher. She was a woman, and she was not afraid. But Kyle was a cornered animal. He couldn't back down. Not now. Not in front of everyone. Get out of my face, Kyle snarled. You can't tell me. I can, Miss Sharma said. And I am. Now. And in that moment, Kyle's twisted rage. His lifetime of unearned, unchecked privilege. His fury at this one woman he could not break. All coalesced into a single, idiotic, irreversible action. He lashed out. He didn't punch. He grabbed. He grabbed the front of Ms. Sharma's suit, bunching the lapels in his fist. Ms. Sharma, reacting instantly, stepped back, pulling her jacket free. But Kyle's other hand shot out, not in a punch, but in a shove meant to humiliate. His hand, tangled in Ms. Sharma's tie, missed, and instead grabbed a fistful of shirt. And he pulled. The sound was sharp. A dry, tearing sound. The sound of cotton and thread giving way. The room gasped. Kyle froze, his hand still holding a piece of Miss Sharma's shirt. He had done it. He had assaulted a teacher. The class was in stunned, horrified silence. Miss Sharma looked down at her ruined shirt. She looked at Kyle's face, now pale, the arrogant smirk replaced by a dawning, idiotic horror. He had crossed a line he could not uncross. And that is when the door opened. Pardon the interruption, Miss Sharma. It was Headmistress Davies, looking flustered. Behind her stood two men. One was Kyle's father, Mr. Thompson, a huge, imposing man in a $3,000 suit, his face like a thundercloud. The other was a man Miss Sharma had not seen in 10 years. A man she had served with. A man who was now the governor of the state. Governor, Miss Sharma said, her voice thick with surprise. The governor, a man who commanded the National Guard, broke into a wide smile, not even noticing the tension in the room. Anya, my God, woman, there you are. I told my staff, find me Anya Sharma. I hear she's hiding out at some prep school. He strode forward, his hand outstretched, pulling Miss Sharma into a one-armed, back-slapping hug. The entire class, and Mrs. Davies, stared, mouths agape. Mr. Thompson, however, had frozen. His eyes were not on the governor. His eyes were on Miss Sharma's torn shirt. And then, his eyes moved to his son, who was still standing, dumbstruck. Governor, forgive me, Mr. Thompson said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He turned to his son. Kyle, what did you do? Kyle's face was white. Dad, she was. Don't you lie to me. Mr. Thompson roared, his voice bouncing off the walls. Mrs. Davies. He pointed a trembling, furious finger at the headmistress. My office. Now. Then he turned to his son. The governor, sensing the gravity, finally saw the torn shirt. Anya, my God. What happened here? Before Ms. Sharma could speak, Mr. Thompson pointed at his son. Beg her for forgiveness. What? Kyle stammered. I said, Mr. Thompson said, his voice shaking with a rage Ms. Sharma had never seen. You get on your knees, and you beg this woman for forgiveness. Now. Dad, I'm not. Now. Mr. Thompson screamed. Kyle, terrified, his entire world crumbling, actually stumbled, his knees hitting the floor. The other three bullies who had been laughing moments before looked like they were about to be sick. I'm sorry, Kyle whispered, tears of humiliation welling in his eyes. He was begging, just as the title promised. But Ms. Sharma held up a hand. The room fell silent. She looked down at the boy, not with triumph, but with a deep, profound sadness. "Stop," Miss Sharma said. "Get up." Kyle, confused, stayed on the floor. "Get up," Miss Sharma commanded. Kyle scrambled to his feet. Miss Sharma looked at Mr. Thompson. She looked at the governor. She looked at the class. "I don't want his apology." Mr. Thompson looked stunned. "But he assaulted you." "Yes, he did," Miss Sharma said, her voice filling the room. "But he's not apologizing because he's sorry. He's apologizing because you," she pointed to Mr. Thompson, "and you," she pointed to the governor, "are here. He's apologizing because he just found out I'm not the nothing he thought I was. He's apologizing because I'm powerful, not because I'm human." She let the words hang. The silence was absolute. The lesson was complete. She looked at her ruined shirt. "You all," she said to the class, "have just witnessed an assault. But you've been witnessing one for 3 weeks. The real lesson isn't what happens when a bully gets caught. The real lesson is asking yourselves, why none of you had the courage to stop it before it got this far?" She looked at the headmistress, who was trembling. "I'll be in my office, waiting for the expulsion paperwork." She turned, and, with her shirt in tatters, she walked out of the room, leaving behind the ruins of a kingdom and the beginning of an education. Ms. Sharma's story shows that prejudice often hides behind power and privilege. Have you ever seen someone in a position of authority be disrespected like this? Share this story to stand up for dignity and respect in our schools. Comment below with your thoughts on the ending. And subscribe for more stories that need to be heard.